All right, welcome everyone. Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here today. I'm Jonathan Singer. I am one of the Harness Technology for Social Good co-leads, and I've had the honor and the privilege to work with these fine folks for a long time. Today we are going to be talking about school policies, syllabus statements around generative AI. Sabrina Jackson and Joanna Cresswell-Baez are going to be the main presenters. I'm going to give a brief overview of the grand challenges first, and then I will hand it over to Sabrina. What is the grand challenge? Actually, go to the next slide, just because we're running a little bit late. So the grand challenge was this initiative that started it started like 10 years ago, and the idea of it, and really it's a way of thinking about what are the ways that we can communicate to the outside world, things that social workers can do to make the world a better place, and how can we focus our energy and attention over a 10-year period to make that happen. Next slide. There are 13 grand challenges. Harness technology is one of them. Next slide. Next slide, there we go. Go Grander is sort of the next phase, right? And so we are actually looking for folks who are interested in ideas for ways that we can think about technology, not as a problem that needs to be solved, but as a tool that social workers can use to address issues in society, many of which are captured under the other 12 grand challenges. So we are excited. If you want to reach out to us, we would love to hear from you. All right, next slide. You can go to the website, the Grand Challenges website. You can see a page there. We've got a white dude with a VR headset, and it's got information about the network leads, Steve Anderson from Illinois, John, Joanna, Laurie, Sabrina, Jen, and myself. And the concept papers and our policy recommendations. All right, next slide. Yeah, there we go. So I just want to say that Joanna and I and Juan Rios, we published an invited editorial in JSWE a few months ago about AI, learning models in social work education and practice. Since we published this, everybody's gone back to school, and there's been this big question about what does it look like when you're trying to think about the policies and the school's perspective on how to communicate to faculty and to students what expectations are about AI, ChatGPT, to a lesser extent the AI image generators. And so what we as a grand challenge wanted to do was to provide a place where folks could come and hear some information about that. And so I want to thank Joanna and Sabrina for volunteering to take the lead on this presentation. And so Sabrina, I'm going to hand it over to you, and thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. I'm going to, as my computer's deciding not to change the screens right now, so one moment. So just initially, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to have the conversation. My colleague, Joanna, hopefully will be able to join us in just a little bit, and just really needing to have conversations across our campuses about what is AI, what is ChatGPT, and of course we know, even in this quote, people on one end of that arc view the technology with anticipation and hope, and those on the other fear and loathing. I think it's such a great summary of how people are feeling, depending on who you talk to and which day of the week you're talking to them about what this is. I think as I've talked to Joanna and other colleagues, we do know it's here, right? And it is here to stay in terms of our having to navigate these tools and these resources, even as we think about what that looks like for faculty members. So when we think about AI, it's a growing field, it's a growing area. that is similar or involving simulation or human-like functions. But the big difference, and Jonathan, feel free to hop in because I know you recently presented on this area, using algorithms and computing. And our colleague John, who's on the call, even talked about that. But some of the examples include things like machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision. There's so many different areas as we think about artificial intelligence. But one of the things that we hear and we're talking often about on our campuses is the notion of chatbots or other tools like ChatGPT. And again, ChatGPT is only one of many massive data sets that are gathering information for us to be able to then use. I'll make a note on the last area there that this model is continually being trained by those who are using it in the system. It's basically pulling that information together and adjusting as it learns in terms of relationships and all the information that is out and available for it to pull. But it's constantly evolving, rapidly evolving as information is made available. It's pulling that information from those various sources.
Yeah, and I just want to welcome Joanna to the webinar, and I will just say that one of the things about chatbots and chat that is, I think, so fascinating and also terrifying is that it is built to present responses that look like they were written by humans, right? And this is different than Google. This is different from anything we've had before. And so this is one of the things that we're grappling with. If it looks like a duck and talks like a duck and walks like a duck, is it ChatGPT, right? Or is it one of our students' papers? So Joanna, welcome. And I will pass the slides back over to you.
All right. Thanks so much. And which one had you just started on this slide?
We had just talked about this slide, and feel free to just hop right in and give your synopsis of just what is AI and ChatGPT, Joanna.
Yeah, we are really in this paradigm shift. So I am so glad you all are here because we are witnessing this live and it is exciting. And I'm hoping you'll be able to take away a few ideas that you can use in your teaching. So had you covered this whole slide? Should we go to the next slide?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, next slide. All right, so there are a lot of different AI chatbot programs. And actually, my Google is now using generative AI. So there was an update that I could click in my Google, and I think pretty soon here, we're going to, and some people already have it in beta, they're going to see it on the side of their Microsoft Word as they are working on their papers. So I just did a quick search here. What are some of the best AI chatbots of 2023? ChatGPT came up first here. And so that's definitely one that we're going to focus on. We're going to give you some examples so that you feel more comfortable with it. Another popular one that we're going to show you is Bing Chat, and that one is connecting directly to the internet. So it's giving you much more live up till, whatever was on the internet yesterday. We are definitely going to share these slides with you all. So we'll work with Grand Challenges to get out those slides. All right, next, our link here. So if you want to, right now, you can Google ChatGPT. We have the link right down here. If you want to multitask and sign up and play around with it, that is definitely encouraged. More are being developed every day. So, this is a kind of a moving and evolving technology. So there might be the new next best one in 3 months. So something to keep our pulse on. All right, next slide. So right now, ChatGPT 3.5 is free, and there is a higher version, and that is ChatGPT Plus. and that is $20 a month. And, you know, I'm thinking about our social work students. I'm thinking about us as social work professors and access and equity, right? Some of our core values here. And not all of our students and not all of us have, you know, the money to put $20 a month. So we really need to keep our eye on this, making sure that technology is accessible for our students and for ourselves. But I did want to highlight, I finally gave in and got the $20 version just the last month or so. And there's a couple of features that are really helpful that I wanted to highlight just for a second. There's a faster response rate. One that I've been using with this ChatGPT Plus is you can actually upload a document and have it read the document and summarize it to you or give an outline. All right, next slide. So here's just a couple of features where I'm getting a little bit geeky for just a second here, and then we'll come on back. There's a new feature that's been recently updated in the last couple of weeks with ChatGPT 4, and that is called advanced data analysis. And there is lots of different things you can do, like generating plots and graphs, doing basic statistics. You know, of course, you need to always be checking this, but it can do a lot more. And that is just kind of a recent update. It used to be called Code Interpreter as of a couple of weeks ago, and now it's called Advanced Data Analysis. Next slide. So one other feature that I think is important for us to know as scholars and in academia is there's a plugin called Scholar AI, and it connects with lots of peer-reviewed papers. You can explore all sorts of reference tools. So just wanted to kind of note, if you get ChatGPT 4 and pay that higher amount, it's right up at the top where you can activate some of these plugins and further advanced features. And I think the reason why I'm showing you this too is this is the future, and they're going to keep innovating with features and plugins. And I want us to really stay at the forefront with our knowledge. Next slide. So, what is it? Here's an example. I thought I'd ask that same question that I asked my Google. What are the leading chatbot programs right now? And what you can notice with ChatGPT is it says, as of my last knowledge update, September 2021, here's what I know. And so, right, there are limitations to this machine learning, this natural language processing. And ChatGPT only has data up until 2021 that it gleaned from the internet and that programmers fed it. So definitely limitations there. But you can see how it works, right? You put in a simple prompt, it gives you some answers. You can continue to talk with it and say, tell me more about ChatGPT 3 and what are all the great features. So you can be in a dialogue with this and continue to learn more. I also wanted to show you, if you click next, to Bing AI. So I asked the same question. It's a little bit small, but I said, what are the leading chatbot programs? And if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see, according to Forbes, the best chatbots of August 2023 are, and then it lists some. So, right, what's that big difference that you're seeing with Bing? You're seeing that it is linking to the internet. So with Bing, which is free, it is using the ChatGPT 4 platform, and it is linking more directly to the internet. So you're going to get a little bit more current information. I wanted to show you then how I talked with it. So if you click next, we got a slide on how I'm talking with it. So I said, what are the main differences between ChatGPT and Bing Chat? And you know, the first one, number one versions, it talks about how the back end of it is GPT-4. So you get some more of those advanced features. Both chatbots have customizations of this language model, but it talks about number 3, that integration that Bing is talking with Edge and Skype and some our internet platforms here. So it's getting more current knowledge. All right, and let me know, Jonathan or Sabrina, if we have any good questions here in the chat. And I see, thanks for answering questions. All right, next slide. Okay, so the other fun thing, and I'm hoping you're seeing that this could be fun to test this out, is creating images. And I know that Jonathan has, I think it's almost a daily image generating group on Twitter, now called X. So check that out. But Bing has a free image creator, and we're going to have a handful of images throughout these slides where we used it, and we'll note it in the source down below. Click next one. There's another image here. So here's what it says: can you create an image of an astronaut walking through a galaxy of sunflowers? And then you see those 4 images. And for many of us who are creating a lot of slides and doing lectures, this could be a really fun way to bring our content to life. There's lots of other programs, just like our chatbot programs. Midjourney is another great one. There is a cost, so I'm thinking access and equity there. Yeah, Nathan in our chat is mentioning Canva. I've played around with that one. It's not quite as smooth as Bing, but check them out and check out Jonathan on X here, doing images about every day on our social work topics. Next slide. Yeah, I'm passing it over to Sabrina.
Thanks, Joanna. So just as it's fascinating and there's so many fun and cool things to do using these new tools, we also have to keep in mind, especially those of us using the social work lens, and as we're thinking about the work that we're doing, even as we're preparing our students to use these tools, we have to also be mindful of the limitations and to be cautious as we use the tools and as we rely on the responses from the tools. Joanna already mentioned, the tool was using the date 2021, right? And of course, so much has been developed and information has been shared in those 2 years that are now missing from that area. And so again, continuing to think about those answers and the responses and reviewing those. Another thing to keep in mind in terms of limitations and cautions is also just biases and stereotypes that may continue to exist in already data, since the tools are pulling from information that is on the web. A lot of that information may contain biases and stereotypes. And so as you ask a question and you receive that information, you may also still be getting biased and information that feeds into current stereotypes. And so needing to review that information and teach students how to review that information for those biases and stereotypes that we know exist already online. The other piece we have to be mindful of and cautious of as we're using these tools is fake citations. The tools will literally make up information or make up citations. One from this particular resource that you see, the link, the authors talked about the tool actually hallucinating and actually making up information. And so we also want to verify once we get information, we need to check our references and check the resources and not assume that the information is accurate based upon that. We also have to think about, I mentioned already that the responses may be outdated because of the tool being less trained or information being pulled in terms of real time from September 21. And so again, as knowledge evolves, this tool is not gotten to the point where it's evolving as quickly. Although it's so much information and very helpful, we also have to think about it there and do our own research in terms of whether or not there are other responses as well. There's also limited ability to perform like calculations. So if you're using it and wanting to use it, for those numbers that sometimes us social workers don't always like to do, we also have to think about the limitations that the tool has as it relates to performing. It cannot perform calculations. And so we also want to keep that in mind as we're navigating the tool. Any others that you would add, Joanna, that come to mind for you?
Just seeing the chat here, right, about those biases and images. When I was creating some of the images for this presentation, I said, put a college professor in and it came up with a male image, right? And so knowing that these are, real biases and that we're going to need to talk back and say, give me a female, give me a non-binary, and really be thoughtful about those biases that are happening.
Thank you. And Claire, I appreciate the comment about your spouse being a librarian and being inundated with those requests that are non-existent sources. And so being really important to talk to our students about that and so that they don't make those assumptions. And so as we move forward with the time that we have remaining, we want to shift to talking about just kind of what it looks like to begin to plan for the use of ChatGPT in our classrooms and things that we need to keep in mind as we're navigating that process. And so from this source, the visual presentation by Jonathan Singer, thank you very much, and Nancy Carr, from a particular survey that took place in March of 23 of college students. So if we're wondering how much our students know about this, are our students using it, this was a great survey that from best colleges that started to talk about that. And as you can see, 43% of the students that were surveyed and that responded to the survey said that they had used generative AI. So more and more of our students know about this tool. 54% said that their instructors, though, have not talked to them about the use of generative AI, which is why we wanted to have this conversation and believe it's important for faculty members to begin to have these kinds of conversations, get knowledge, get training so that we can introduce these conversations in the classroom because our students are already doing it. 22% said that they had used generative AI to complete papers or exams. I imagine that number will increase as more and more students learn about it. Certainly as we begin to talk about it, as the tools, even become more popular. 60% said that instructors, though, and their schools had not addressed how to use AI tools ethically and responsibly. And that's where we really sit in this conversation, why it's so important, not only in social work, but just in general, but certainly social work, a profession that's bound by a code of ethics. We want to have these conversations and need to have these conversations with our students about how to ethically and responsibly use tools like this, whether it's in the classroom or even in practice. And so as we think about planning for ChatGPT in the classroom, there's some steps. Another great article, one of the things that was really important in the presentation, I love, even as Joanna created a number of the slides, making sure that we share the resources with you so that you have more time to go back and look. But a really great article by Darby that talked about 4 steps. If you're really at the front end of this process and you're really trying to think about where do I go, how do I do this in a way that makes sense, and how can I introduce something that's so new to me to my students? The first step is to really get familiar with the tools. Start to, like you're doing now, attending workshops like this, starting to read things online, but really getting familiar with some of those tools and starting to practice. Just like we did way back when with Googles and other kinds of tools that were introduced to us, same thing we need to do in this case is start to just kind of tinker around with it, play around with it, and just explore the possibilities. The second thing we need to do is to get ready to talk about it in class. I think the days are gone where we cannot do it. I think we really have to be proactive and have these conversations with our students in the classroom and find out what our students know, start to think about where they sit with it, because students are having conversations themselves. We need to be honest about it. Students can learn from our example. We can share that we don't know it all, that we are still learning, we're still exploring the tools, and students appreciate that transparency, and they appreciate knowing that as faculty members, we're still learning and growing in this. And here are just a few suggestions of steps that Darby also shared in terms of conversations you can have in the classroom. First, acknowledging that ChatGPT and other chatbots are quickly becoming a part of our lives, that it is here to stay, and get students engaged in that in the beginning of the class, and ask them to just share their thoughts about it. What do they know about it? Their opinions about it, and be clear on when it's okay and not okay to use the tools. And in this presentation, we're also going to give you some examples of some university policies. Many universities now have seen that they have to create and need to develop some guidance for their faculty. And so we're going to give you some examples and then some links to show that you are able to do that as well. So again, from you as a faculty member, what are you comfortable with and what are you not comfortable with in your class in terms of how you'd like to see students use the tools or not use the tools when it comes to the coursework or assignments in your class? Let them know again about your schools or your university's code of ethics, academic integrity, what your university says as it relates to plagiarism. And again, reminding students, we know and we remind students about how important it is to cite references when the idea is not theirs or the words are not theirs. So we have in that policy, that academic integrity policy, we have some guidance. And so we are able to have those conversations with students. And finally, another step to keep in mind with the conversation in your class is just to discuss the value of doing the work and learning for themselves. How important is it for students, especially social work students, but of course across all disciplines, but how important it is for them to learn the content and to navigate these processes and get the knowledge and skills themselves, instead of outsourcing that to the machine or outsourcing that to these particular tools. And so it's helping students to understand when it's appropriate to use the tools and when it may not be. And so as we think about the next couple of steps, again, if you suspect that students are using AI-related devices or tools to cheat, we also have to be really careful not to rush to judgment, right? Just like we do when we're navigating plagiarism or other concerns about plagiarism, I think we need to keep that in mind as well. And follow the process, follow your university's policies when it relates to plagiarism. But one of the things that we're encouraging you to do, and I encourage the faculty at UA to do, is to analyze the work. They're able to compare. I have a case right now. A faculty member just sent me just last week of an undergraduate student, and what she was doing is comparing the student's work, looking at previous papers and now looking at the paper that was recently submitted, and they seem drastically different. And so, starting to ask that question about the work and comparing the work, but also then talking to the students about it, about the writing process, about, what you're seeing in terms of the differences. And then, of course, always look into your university's guidelines for reporting plagiarism and even having to assess those things. But keep in mind, though, is if you use a plagiarism detection tool, we have to be really careful and cautious because although the tools do exist, what we're learning and what the information that is being shared now is that they don't accurately detect AI writing. As much as we'd like to be able to say that Turnitin can do it, even our university recently stopped using the Turnitin feature, AI feature, because it was just not reliable. But here, there are a number of detectors that you can consider using. But again, we suggest that you use them with caution. GPT-0, Originality AI content at scale, all these are free resources that you can use. But oftentimes, the best detection is your work, right? And your knowledge and understanding of where students are and where they need to be in that process. And so I know Jonna will pick up and I'll just highlight that this was a image that Joanna pulled from Being Creator when asked the questions, what steps and we want to ask you, we have some time to, what steps will you use in your classroom for addressing AI? And if you just use the chat for us, I know, thank you for being active in that chat area, but kind of tell us what, we just shared 4 steps to consider, but what would you do in your classroom? Or what have you done already to address AI and ChatGPT in your classrooms?
Yeah, type in the chat. Have you chatted with your students about it? Have you been, honest about where you're at and honest that this technology is developing? Are you on step 1, which is okay wherever you are at? And do you need to get familiar with these tools and maybe have a little fun with the free ChatGPT? Type in the chat. Where are you at here? Are you on step 3 and you've suspected some students of using AI and you're navigating that similar to how we'd navigate any of our other plagiarism instances?
I love Donna suggested you can put an honor statement for them to initial or acknowledge at the beginning of an assignment, just a reminder, a starting place. That's a great suggestion. Depending on which policy or direction you decide to go, that's a great suggestion.
Nice. And Stacy, maybe testing it out today. And I know Melissa has been using it and thinking about it. You're evaluating if we're depending too much on writing. So you're rethinking maybe a little bit some of your assignments in terms of what are we teaching? What's the learning objectives?
And I appreciate, Nathan, your comment about how you've seen your school move from, your MPH program move from initially do not use it to now, okay, how do we view or what's appropriate? And I think that's where a lot of universities and programs are going. It was first like, no, we cannot use this. We don't want students to use it at all, to now maybe we need to think about, because we can't police that or control that, how do we help students to use this in an ethical manner?
Yeah. And Tammy is saying, I haven't talked enough as I'm learning, right? And maybe step into some of these discussions. Ask your students, are they familiar with it? Get a pulse in that classroom. Are they using it? Is it that 43% of your students? I was surprised. I had these discussions. I'm teaching 2 policy sections this semester, and I would say about 60 to 70% of my students in my class said, oh, like, I don't know about that. Like, that is, they kind of had it classified as bad. And so, it was interesting to talk about the ways that it could be helpful and how they could use it and what my policy was in my classroom. Let's go on to the next slide because we're going to get into these policies here. So we want to give you some ideas. It's never too late to bring in some ideas for your syllabus, and maybe this could be a joint discussion that you decide together. We wanted to tell you what was out there in terms of how universities are, what recommendations are giving for your syllabus and policy. All right, so what we're finding is most universities are giving faculty 3 to 4 options to choose from, depending on their class, depending on their learning objectives, depending on their own comfort, right? We are all learning this together. So an example here from Harvard, 3 different options. So you have academic freedom, right, in this. So one is a restrictive policy. And if you click on these links or type them in, you'll see these different, they actually give the words for you if you're struggling with how exactly do I write this. A fully encouraging draft policy, and then a mixed draft policy. Maybe there's some acceptable uses and some not acceptable uses. And that's actually where I've landed for this semester. Now, when I finished, I used it in my spring course, and I had a fully encouraging policy. And I was giving examples on how we can use it in class. But what I found is my students needed a little bit of guardrails, right? There was a couple that just copy and pasted, and that is definitely plagiarism. So going back to, we're teaching them how to use this new tool. And this is an important thing that they're going to need in their practice. So mine is right now, acceptable uses are brainstorming, outlining, idea generating, grammar checking, and you're going to see that often in this mixed draft policies across, and probably your university, if you Google right now, probably has put out some syllabus guidelines and has these different choices. And then what I did for my not acceptable is I said, direct use of words from AI, right? So that we can't copy and paste. Delaware got a little bit more. They've got 4 options here, prohibiting it, allowing it with permission, allowing their use with only in explicit knowledge, and then freely allowing their use. Other professors have generated this together, right? Take this as an opportunity to empower them, the students. I also saw yesterday while I was looking through all these different ones, and feel free to put your policies here. We'd love to get the collective wisdom here. Stanford actually had said the blanket statement, much more conservative, that no one can use it, that the students can't use it. So I am seeing some small pockets of that. Let's hear Brenda saying at MSU Denver, one of the professors developed the AI policy and added it. Yep, with the students. That's great, Brenda. Yep. So I'm finding this kind of, here's some acceptable that I'm teaching, and here's the unacceptable. Now, it does put the burden on the students because some professors might say, don't use it, right? And others are saying, use it. And so we are kind of in a confusing time that there isn't one overarching kind of policy. Any other thoughts on this? And Jonathan, Sabrina, any thoughts on this?
Let me just say that there is a Google group called AI in Education that I know that Joanna and I are involved in, and their folks are constantly sharing resources on there and having discussions about syllabi and things like that. But I would just say that I think the word of the day is experiment. Because we're just making this up. And so if you have policies and protocols that you want to share with us at the Grand Challenges, we can collate these on a Google Doc, and we can make that available as kind of a one-stop shop so that we can share these resources.
Wonderful. And I see people are putting their links. We've got Princeton, right? Rutgers. So we're also seeing, and this comes out of the Google group on AI and education that Jonathan was mentioning, we're seeing these decision trees, right? People are looking at their assignments and saying, how comfortable am I integrating teaching with AI, ChatGPT? What is my learning objective? And do I need to update it, modify it based on this understanding of ChatGPT? And so Barnard is doing some very innovative stuff here. And if you look at Barnard Generative AI, Google that, you're going to see they've got a lot more information. But here's some simple decision trees. So on the left-hand side, what is my position on AI use, right? Is it possible for students to work on assignments using generative AI tools? And you can check out your own assignments, right? Take your assignment, put a piece of it into ChatGPT and see what the responses are that you're getting, see if there needs to be some modification. I'm rethinking a couple of papers and bringing them more into the classroom as a discussion and a share out. Some things I'm keeping the same, right? I think it's actually making me a better instructor. The second decision tree on the right-hand side, right? Are you concerned about AI in your assignments, right? Do your assignments align with the learning, the course purpose and the learning objectives? Yes, no. So I think these are some helpful things. Now, this is kind of this next tier, and I really feel like we're going to be innovating as professors with AI for the next 3 years. So if this is feeling like I don't have time to change my assignments, right? That's okay. Like, this is going to be kind of a 3-year, I think, process of really understanding how we are teaching with AI and how our learning is changing. Jonathan and I were emailing this morning. There was another group. I'm going to try to remember where they were at. Maybe you remember, Jonathan. And they took Bloom's taxonomy and had another column for AI and whether or not different levels of learning might need to change based on AI. I'll try to get that link for
Oregon
you.
State.
There we go. Oregon State. Okay. There we go. Oregon State, right? So everyone is innovating and thinking about this in terms of our teaching and learning. Next slide. Oh, yes, Sabrina.
I was just going to add, I saw someone in the chat mention just kind of even the impact on asynchronous courses. And I know you teach quite a bit online and just kind of how we have to rethink even how we're developing online courses and the kinds of assignments that we have in those asynchronous
With
courses.
GoDaddy, you can create an easy-to-build, powerful website, so you can start selling
think we
online.
got-
Lots of places.
I
Metro
think,
State University of
Alan,
Denver
if you could
their new
mute, I
semester
think
this
you
week.
accidentally turned on
New
your
policy on artificial
audio. There we go. Yes. So yeah, many of us are teaching online and those discussion boards, I am rethinking them a little bit right now, currently in the process of rethinking them. So thanks, for bringing that attention to online. This is another cool resource. This is a generated document. Anyone can go in and edit it by Lance Eaton, who's very active in this Google group. And these are all different classroom policies on using AI generative tools. So you're going to see someone who's teaching a social work course or someone who's teaching a generative AI course and putting in their information. So feel free to check that out. You should, if you Google classroom policies for AI generative tools and Lance Eaton, you should be able to come up with that. Next slide. So, what are you thinking for your policies? Are you going with what your college had to say? I know many of you put in those links, right? But let's think together and let's think in community about how we are creating these policies. I know we only have a few more minutes, so let's go to our next slide here. Sabrina is remembering, is this me?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So Jonathan and I wrote an article here in the Journal of Social Work Education, and there are lots of different ideas for how you can use AI, ChatGPT specifically in your classroom. If you want more ideas, that paper has a lot more. But editing papers, I'm using it in my writing for grammar and editing. Maybe some of our students can, right? That's not plagiarism, right? This is using it as a tool. Maybe understanding more about key concepts. So we were looking at some current policies. I was using Bing so I could get some more current data on some current policies, and it was helping enrich our idea generating. Maybe even like time management, self-care, study strategies, right? Maybe what you're going to cook for dinner. Generating project ideas, right? Literature review searches. And I think the next slide, I wanted to show you something that a student showed me last week. Oh, wait, it's in a couple of slides here. There's an online book that has lots of ideas here. So check that out. Is an open access book. Next slide. All right, here's the tool that I was talking about. So this was a student that brought this to me and said, hey, have you heard of Elicit? And it creates literature reviews. So you put in your topic, and the topic I put in was teaching with ChatGPT. And similar to Google Scholar, right? It was giving me all of these current papers. I could sort it by year. I could sort it by citations. And then it actually gave me a summary of the top 4 papers. So there are lots of tools like this that are coming out, lots of plugins that are going to support our work, that are going to support our students, and our students are using these. In fact, the student brought it to us. So check them out. Hopefully you're getting excited to play around. I'll pass it over to Jonathan because you've got our next webinar in our series.
Thank you, Joanna. So yeah, just to verbally answer some of the things in the chat, folks will have access to this PowerPoint so that you can have access to the links. At the next webinar, which is going to be on October 10th, I'm going to be talking about ChatGPT in the classroom, the new teacher's aid, right? So we're going to be focusing on ways that you as a social work educator can use this, how you can talk about this with students, how you can think about lessons and learning objectives related to integrating this with some of the content around practice. It's not a webinar about using AI in practice, but it's about how you teach and think about teaching students about this. We're also going to have this webinar in February with John and Laurie talking about generative AI and social work research. And Joanna shared some great tools that you can use for research. And then we're going to end the series focusing directly on practice, right? And that's with Jen and Laurie. Which honestly, we did this in part because we're still figuring out right how you work this in practice, and so we didn't want to have the practice one first because we're still figuring this out. Again, the idea of experimenting and practicing and sharing ideas. We hope that this webinar has been an opportunity for you to think about ChatGPT, generative AI, questions that you can bring back to your colleagues and your faculty, so that you can be better prepared to tackle some of the conceptual issues as well as some of the practical ones. Now let's see. Okay, I was just looking through. I think that's it. If there's any burning questions, why don't we have folks? You can raise a hand if you have a burning question. We have time for one or two, and if not, obviously you're welcome to log off as you need. But if you have a burning question, please raise your hand and ask it, or pop it in the chat.
Yeah, and maybe as people are heading out or we're answering questions, type in the chat. What is that next step that you're going to take with AI in your teaching? Let's all really move this field forward and help be at the table of AI and social work.
So there was a question about CSWE's position. My guess is that CSWE as an organization is not going to have a position outside of acknowledging that technology is something that schools are that's their purview. I am part of the technology advisory group, which is at this point dormant because staff have moved around at CSWE, but it is certainly something that could be sort of a formal CSWE offering. I know that at the at SWIR, Joanna, Sabrina, and Laurie, we are going to be presenting on AI. So for all of you who are going to SWIR and you want to hang out with us again in person, you're welcome to.
And Jonathan, may I also add, we have at CSWE, we do have a technology track.
Oh yes, of course.
So
you were co-chair of.
Yeah, I'm co-chairing that technology track. We welcome your participation and attendance. You know, those track meetings are always at the oddest time, so I can't promise what time it will be.
7 a.m.
But I know, right? So we hope you'll come, though. That's a great opportunity to also talk to other folk who are grappling with similar questions as it relates to this technology and others. And so would welcome your attendance at that CSWE Tech Track meeting in Atlanta.
Yes, that's right. Yes, and SWIR is Society for Social Work and Research. That's the January conference. And somebody said, it'd be great if we had one of these once a month. So we agree. That's actually how this started, because we were like, we really feel like we need to have something once a month or on a regular basis, because so much is coming out. And then because of time and resources for those of us on the Grand Challenge, we decided on 4 over the course of the 2 semesters. But if you decide that you're going to give a webinar or have something at your school, and it's something that's open, again, that's the kind of thing you could send a link out and we could share it if it's something that is open, so that more people could access that, and we could, again, have more of these conversations. So thank you. All right. And I gotta say, it's been so great seeing all of you chat, and it's so great to see some of you that we've seen in person, but not for a long time here. So thank you so much for coming out and sharing your thoughts, and for listening. And Sabrina and Joanna, Thank you so much for your thoughtfulness in putting together this presentation. Thank you to Kira Silk for setting up the registration and the Zoom. And then, of course, for the other co-leads who are going to be presenting in the future webinars. So hope everyone has a great rest of your day and have a good weekend. Thank you so much.